When I turned 6, my parents discovered that my eyesight was weak. And till then, my handwriting, I would write between the lines. I couldn't read the blackboard. I couldn't read dates off a calendar. If somebody called me from afar, I wouldn't respond appropriately because I couldn't see very clearly. So I really seemed like a kid on her own trip, and I was on my own trip. And the one interesting outcome from this was that because things on the outside were a blur, my attention seemed to have turned inwards. I was more tuned towards what was going on within me, my inner reactions, my inner responses. My feelings were in sharp focus as opposed to things on the outside. And that, I think, has remained the stance, a prominent stance of having one eye within has remained with me since then. I think it was just the initial leaning of the brain. So for someone who was almost uninterruptedly aware of what was going on inside, I can say this, that anger was not an emotion that I was acquainted with. And here is an interesting point to note, because an angry person will rarely say that I am angry. An angry person will usually say, I am not angry. It is because of you that I am angry. You are making me angry. Otherwise, I'm not angry. So this is it's a usual response. It's a typical response. And being aware of that response, I can say with certainty and with surety that I was not an angry child. I was not an angry teenager. In fact, I think my teachers will bear witness to that. I was not an angry young adult, but by the time I hit my mid-30s, I was not just angry, I was raging. It was like a tumult within me. It was as if I was imploding. And it would show sometimes, but there was so much going on within me. And it was a very alien feeling for me. I was very bewildered by this realization. It threw me off because I'd never been that way before. And what helped me was that by then, I had been writing a journal for a few years. And I began to see that there were patterns of my mind that my brain had seemed to have gotten stuck within. So the question arose that if you are using a certain circuit in your mind over and over again, then does that circuit become stronger and stronger to the extent that it can grip you and you can become stuck in it? And to my mind and my experience and my observation, it seemed true that if you are engaging with something over and over again, then those grooves are becoming deeper and deeper. So I began to do some research. I started reading on the work of neuroscientists. I started talking to people here. I looked up the work of people in the UK and all across the US. People who mapped the brain, psychiatrists, psychologists, behavioral economists, anybody who was working on the brain and the mind and its consequence on behavior. And I found that at that time, this was around 2007, 2008, that this consideration that the grooves may be getting deeper and deeper as you use a particular circuit was more on the fringes of the research, but it was being considered. There was one other consideration that drove my research, which was that is there a connection between stress and chronic anger? Because I found that my anger came from a feeling of being overwhelmed. There was too much information coming my way. There was pressure to constantly keep up, not just keep up, but to make your responses faster and faster. There was pressure to be with it. Your mobile phone mattered, what you wore mattered, what car you drove mattered, the definitions, the things that defined success mattered too much. They were all material. How you traveled, and I'm sure parents will know this, children will know this, what holidays you were taking mattered, all this mattered. I felt that there was no time to take any stock. So it was from this extreme sense of stress that I felt that I was entrapped. I was trapped in a system that did not offer me any choices. And so to check on this connection between stress and chronic anger, I wrote to, one of the people I wrote to is a neuroscientist. His name is Bruce McEwen, and he's largely considered the father of stress neurobiology. He's based in New York. He wrote back to me saying, he said, my work is on stress. My work is not on anger. You're making a film on anger. And I said, I think they are connected. I think they're intricately connected. He said, okay, send me a set of questions, which I did. And he looked at them and he said, yeah, these are all relevant to my work. So we shot with him. And we shot with many other. We shot from the East Coast to the West Coast. We shot with people in the UK and in India. And the film that came out, it took 4 years to make, and it came out around 2012, is a film called The Subtext of Anger, which deals with various facets of anger. And what I think it highlights, uniquely almost for that time also, and even now, is this connect between stress and chronic anger. I'll play you the promo. The film itself is 45 minutes. The promo is 3 minutes.
Anger is a destructive emotion. We not only destroy others, but we destroy ourselves.
I could kill my children, kill my husband if I could when I get angry.
Angry people always start with you statements. You did this. Rather than, I feel.
Women typically have trouble in expressing it. They've been told they shouldn't. It's not the female job. And men are almost encouraged to be aggressive and assertive.
In terms of what happens to our body is, at a hormonal level, we have what's called the fight or flight response.
When you're highly aroused, your blood pressure goes up, your respiration goes up, your heart rate goes up, pupils on your eyes, they dilate.
It gets triggered from a certain point in the brain, but it spreads rapidly.
I do feel we live in a society now that does seem to chase success and chase success and chase success, and the structures in society make us feel like that's what we have to do, and I don't quite understand who makes these decisions, who says we have to do this.
It's like people are pedaling on this little mouse wheel and they can't get off because they're part of this structure that's moving them forward, and they're almost powerless to get off because they need to pay their mortgages, they need to pay their school fees for their children, they need to keep up with the Joneses or keep up with some financial structure.
What we call being stressed out.
The speed of modern life, fire hose of information being shot at us.
Things are happening faster and faster and faster.
I personally think that frustration is the key thing.
It is the constant feeling of being frustrated or threatened, of competition, of pressure.
Right now, most people in this modern world are seriously out of harmony.
So as you see, the film actually highlights the dark grip of anger. But it has to be said at this point, I think, that anger is a necessary emotion. We're hardwired with it. It's part of the primitive cortex of our brain, and it has a function, which is that it alerts us to something that may be wrong or some kind of injustice. My speakers before me, both Piyush and Sandhya, have both spoken about injustice. And anger does that. Anger is an ignition to alert us to something that is unjust or wrong, and then it gives us that energy. But you need to channelize it. You can't sustain yourself on anger, because when you stew in it, and if it grips you, either out of excessive expectation, which I think is a malaise of our times, we're expecting things up there all the time because that's the messages we're getting from the media. Your life has to be a certain way, you have to look a certain way, this is what success means. Or out of an excessive sense of ego, which is, I don't like this, I want it this way, I want it like that, how dare he say this to me, and so on and so forth. Or out of excessive stress from either one or a combination of all of them. Then the consequences are disastrous, not just to the mind and the psyche, which is obvious, but to the body. Because stress and anger have similar reactions. It's called the fight or flight reaction, as he mentioned, which is that you are faced with a threat and your brain perceives it as a threat. So it pumps your body with these biochemicals. They are akin to steroids. And all your energy goes into your limbs, into your hands and into your legs. Because you have to fight the threat or you will flee from it, the fight or flight reaction. So what happens subsequently is that everything else in the body stops at that point in time. And most importantly, digestion stops. Because the brain is telling the body, this is no time for you to digest your food. So all repair, nurturing, nourishing, and healing activities in the body stop. Because this is an extreme situation. It's an intense reaction. And that is the purpose. It is meant to spike intensely, and it's meant to come down as quickly. And if that does not happen because you are stressed and you're not managing your stress, or you're not even aware of how stressed you're getting, then there's always that danger, if I may, of getting caught into this wheel of chronic anger. And I have to say that while it's disastrous for everybody, it's more so for adolescents, because this is the time when their nervous systems, their digestive systems, their bodily systems, their brains, their temperament, their leanings are being formed. So it's very important, I would imagine, to watch stress levels at this particular age. I think we've defined the problem. I've spoken a fair amount about, about how dark and disastrous anger can be. I think there are some pointers and some suggestions, if I may, which can keep stress in check. And this is a lot for my young friends here. The first and the foremost is to play sport. And by play, no video games. Okay, video games are fun, but they can draw you in. By sport, it means that you go onto a field, you go into a park, you go onto a court. It could be a group of you, it could be two of you, it could be you alone. You can cycle alone, you can jog alone, you can dance alone. But physical activity is absolutely essential, because there's one neuroscientist, one psychiatrist, he heads a criminal facility, he consults at a criminal facility in the UK, and he said, if a person comes back after a 6-mile jog, I guarantee you he can't get into a fight because he's exhausted his aggression in a very positive way. And there's another lady who, her name is Vijay Lakshmi Ravindranath. She's the founder director of the National Brain Research Center. She's now in Bangalore with the Indian Institute of Science. And she gave a talk recently at the IIC for senior citizens. And she was talking about the brain and how it works and how it functions. And when she threw it open for questions, almost every third question, if not every second question, was on how do we keep our brains as we age? How do we keep our brains more active and alert? And people said, should we do puzzles? Should we do Sudoku? Should we learn a language? Should we learn an instrument? Should we meet up with friends? Keep a social life going? And she said, yeah, okay, fine. All that is going to help you. Especially with young people. If you learn an instrument, the kind of concentration and focus it requires really does wonders for the brain. She said, all that is great. But the one thing that you have to consistently do is to throw in a certain amount of physical exercise. If you're exercising every day, the brain is a muscle. If you're exercising every day, it is pumping keeping all your systems robust and in tandem and in harmony, and it does wonders for the brain. Nothing comes close to physical exercise. So that's the first pointer. The second one is to monitor, and this is an unpopular one, I'm sure, is to monitor your screen time. Because there are several reasons for that. The first is that every time you engage with the internet, or you're on WhatsApp, or you're messaging your friends, there is nothing coming from there that's going to tell you, stop, this is enough for the day. It's relentless. You can continue engaging with it at any point in the day and as much as you want. So it becomes important for you to be conscious of the fact that I need to stop, enough for today, and one has to stop there. Why? Because if you don't stop there, it will affect your circadian rhythm, which is you don't eat properly, your mind is diverted and distracted, you don't sleep enough, you can engage with anybody at any point in time at night, then you wake up the next day feeling tired and fatigued, and you're trying to keep up in school. That makes you sluggish, and then it makes you irritable, and then it makes you angry. So that's precisely the loop that we're trying to stop from getting into. So circadian rhythm. But more interestingly was this fact that a scientist from the National Center for Biological Sciences, his name is Shona Chatterjee, and he made a very pertinent comment. He said that when we are engaging with things which are constantly asking for an instant reaction, everything has to be quick and everything has to be faster and faster, then we are using those parts of the brain which are designed for instant reactions. But the other parts of the brain, and a lot of it, which is designed for deeper, reflective, more analytical thought, is therefore not being put to enough use. And that part of the brain actually is designed that you think about things, you let them lie, you chew on them, you let them seep in, you put things together, come up with a more cohesive or a wholesome understanding of things. So therefore, cutting down on this engaging with media, which is constantly asking for instant reactions, becomes therefore very important, because it makes you more and more reactionary rather than responsive. And the last point, I think, is interpersonal skills. I find that when we were researching the film, again, we spoke with the scientist, and he quoted several studies where he said that you ask a young person today to say something personal about their lives, and you meet with, more often than not, you meet with silence or resistance. And you put the same person in front of a screen, and he'll type out 5 pages. So interpersonal skills is really a question of making sure that children, adolescents are with and comfortable with and around people. Those interpersonal skills are very, very important for emotional stability. Because it's all right if kids today are spending time with a computer in a little capsule by themselves. Privacy is also important. I understand that. I understand that a lot, actually. But I think that there can be situations where our digital world, which is our current reality, may get temporarily suspended. And I'd like to give an example. There were floods last year in Chennai, and this lady wrote about it. She said, the first thing that stopped working were our set-top boxes, because it was raining very heavily, and set-top boxes stop working the moment there's a slight drizzle. So we didn't have access to information or the news. The second thing that went was electricity. So by and by, our mobiles lost charge. So places that had a landline, and if that landline worked, was like a helpline. The third was because the internet was not working and there was no electricity, we didn't have access to ATMs. So she said, ultimately, 3 things helped. The first was battery-operated transistors for information. The second was hard cash, whatever money you had at home. And the third was being and having good neighbors. Which brings me to one last point I want to make, and I'd like to ask the audience this. What if the Indian word for health, can somebody volunteer the Indian word for health? Swast. So swast, interestingly, comes from two roots. It comes from swa and ast. And swa is self, which includes all the layers, physical, mental, emotional, vital, and if you wish, spirit. And ast means to be centered. So sports or physical exercise for strength and body. Monitoring screen time for stability in the mind, a concentrated and a stable mind. And interpersonal skills, or spending time with people for emotional stability. And I think we arrive at swast, and we can defeat stress and anger. So, thank you. I think the Indian word for stress also actually encapsulates a very stable sense of empathy, and I think we will need it for ourselves and from each other. Thank you.